Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Mindset Shift. I have my dear friend, Lisa Zawrotny, with me today. She is a productivity and organizational coach, and she and I met in this lovely little online space and totally hit it off. She has supported me. I have supported her. We just had a wonderful connection from our own expertise and just general awesomeness, which is one of my favorite things about connecting with people in this online world. So I brought her on today to share, well, actually more of a conversation. So she and I chat a fair amount, and we have these wonderful conversations that dive deep into really interesting topics. I always enjoy them because they kind of expand, like, when you're talking with somebody and you start going and you're like, oh, that, and then play off of each other. So that's the way our conversations almost always go. And so I wanted to share one I thought was particularly relevant for Lisa's area of expertise and enjoyment, and one that I've seen popping up a lot, especially the holiday seasons, around gratitude. And she's got a fabulous gratitude group that I will share a link to in the notes below so you can check it out. But before we get started and just kind of dive into that, Lisa, share a little bit about yourself, because I just shared about you. So tell the lovely people watching a little bit more about you.
Thank you. Yes. Hi, everyone. Productivity and organizing coach is a great way to start, but imagine, if you will, a combination of professional organizer, life coach, and productivity coach kind of rolled into one. That's what I do. I like to take the concepts of productivity and turn them a bit on their sides, question everything, and figure out how everything is connected in our lives to really get to the right kind of time management, to do value-based decluttering, and to figure out a way to simplify our way to the things that we really want to do and that we love to do. That's what I do in a nutshell. And gratitude is definitely one of them. So I'm super excited to chat with you today about that.
Yay. Awesome. So that's one of the things that kind of jumped out. I saw somebody post something about gratitude and wanting more and feeling confused about that. And I was like, oh, Lisa talks about this sort of thing, especially as someone who helps people grow and build and have more and create space, like that sense of abundance, right? To have more, yet also with a strong emphasis around gratitude. And I was like, you're the perfect person to have this conversation with, because it's like almost finding that harmony between those two things is a core component of what you do. So yes. I have lots of thoughts on
What? That's a shock to me.
I know, right? One of the little known things about me is that I'm highly opinionated. On my own time. But tell me a little bit about how you conceptualize those two things that seem like they could be really opposed in, I'm feeling grateful, which can lead to a sense of, I don't want to say, maybe complacency is the word that I want, where we feel like I'm okay, I'm good. I have so much gratitude and love for where I am in my life and for the things in my life and all of that. And we can talk about like what you do when you don't actually feel grateful, but like that sense of calm doesn't seem to lend itself to like motivation, right? So like how do you think of those two things?
Well, it's interesting that you should describe it that way, because one of the things that I started to think about as you were talking about like the potential gap or the dichotomy between the two was this idea of, when you're not made to be feeling grateful, but when it's highly encouraged from an outside force, that there's this inconsistency with saying, but I want more. And it's like, but be grateful for what you have. And to me, I see that tug and pull. But I also think it's interesting to say, okay, but if you're also feeling gratitude, if you're talking about gratitude is equal to contentment, then maybe you're not seeking more. I think it's going to depend upon the situation and how you're feeling. Is there like some guilt happening, or is there some confusion? Where I was coming from, there's a quote that I want to share. So like, if you have to hit pause and come back to this, this is something to take with you. And it's from Sophia Bush. And it's the idea that you can be both a masterpiece and a work in progress simultaneously.
I love
And
that
I
one so much.
love that quote so much, because it's like, it's not that we ever need permission to do things, but somehow when we get permission, doesn't it just feel better? So it's this idea of saying, oh yeah. So one moment I can be striving for more, and the next moment I can be good with what I have. And I'm allowed to jump back and forth. I think maybe there's this impression that we have to be right where we are and stay put and stop jumping around. And maybe it's okay.
Yeah.
So, let's start talking with, your description of that. If you feel contentment in the moment, that you're not motivated to do more. It, I guess the question is, you have to ask yourself, is that true? Or is that you want to, I don't know, bask in the moment? Isn't that okay? Like to revel in the moment? Like, for example, sometimes I feel like we don't celebrate enough. So maybe that's what it is, that we're celebrating all the good that is happening before we go, what's next? What's next? We don't want to be like those kids at Christmas where they're ripping open the packing, the wrapping paper's flying everywhere. And you're like, did you even look at that last gift? Did you like take a moment, I know. But so sometimes we can be excited like those kids. But so that's kind of how I perceive it, is sometimes it's celebrating, sometimes it's basking, sometimes it's taking a break. Doesn't necessarily have to mean, right? What do you think?
So many thoughts as you're talking,
Yes.
right? This is why we're
shocker.
I know, right? So I'm thinking about that, and it's like, along the lines of, so opening presents, right? There's actually like a chemical thing that happens in your brain, the lead up to, Christmas or a birthday or, whatever it is that you're celebrating, you get to that point, and then there's a letdown, like chemically in our brain. And I forget what it was I was reading, but it was like, there's a letdown once you pass that point that you've been anticipating. And how we interpret that letdown, as though like gratitude could be a great way of embracing that experience. Like when you feel that letdown, knowing it's the chemicals in your brain, because I love all the neuroscience stuff. It's the chemicals in your brain. How you interpret that then releases more chemicals, right? So like, if taking that pause to feel gratitude can then energize you to do the next thing. But when gratitude is a should, right, that's when it feels like a restrictive. Is what I like early on when you were first talking. I was hearing like that idea of like, where is that sense that you need to feel grateful coming from? Is it like an internal, I feel grateful, or I should be grateful, or where is that coming from? And if it's a should, then it is going to pull your energy in, and you're not going to be as motivated. But if it's coming from a place of allowing yourself to pause and really embrace what you have, it can lend itself to a certain amount of enthusiasm for building the next thing.
Yeah. And re-experiencing that moment, because there is, speaking of neurological connections, your brain doesn't necessarily distinguish between when it first happened and when you're revisiting it in a really celebratory kind of way. It loves to be like, oh, yay. It's like it happened again, That's why reminiscing, and when you connect with people and you have those memories, the shared memories with people, and you can talk about the good old days, or, whatever it happens to be, why that's so important for us, because you get to relive it and you get to experience that high in a fashion. And like you said, re-energize you.
Yeah. So it's interesting when you say that, because I'm thinking about like, so one of the things that'll come up with energy drains when I'm working with clients, and you probably see this too, of like the idea of a resentment, something happened and you resent it. And I'll break it down as re-sentiment is to re-feel something, right? So basically, yes, you may have been initially hurt and that was beyond your control, but you are then doing it to yourself over and over again in the re-sentiment, refeeling. And so where are you focusing that energy on refeeling hurt versus focusing that energy, and it comes to intention, focusing that energy on the things to feel grateful for, so that you can then energize yourself to build. It's more of a building energy.
Yeah, because what you focus on, you fuel. So you want to grow the good. And it's just like with the whole, it's hard for me to use the good and bad. I want to get away from judgments, but let's just say you have habits that serve you and habits that don't. And so in the habits coaching part of my world, it's really not the thing to be able to get rid of a bad habit. You don't get rid of it, but I say you crowd it out with what serves you, what is the good things for you, if you will. So this is that same idea of being able to crowd out the negative and the resentment with that celebratory, with, focusing on what worked. And so sometimes that is searching too. It could be one of those things that just sucked. Let's put it out there. But but somewhere in there, you're like, but look at all my wonderful friends who came to my aid and took me out for a drink and loved me. And, and you find those little moments and those little lights within whatever happened. And you grow that to say, okay, I can try this again because I know I have a support system, or, oh, I learned how it didn't work, or whatever it happens to be. But
well, and it's like the Fred Rogers quote about looking for the helpers in a tragedy.
Oh yes. Every time something hurts our hearts, and unfortunately so many things keep coming around, I share that one. And it's exactly that, because we're in the moment, and yes, we have to acknowledge what's happening, but we can't sit with it, because what's it going to do? But if we can search for the good, or search for the opportunity to at least energize us to recover. And that's one of the things about gratitude that I talk a lot about. It's a power habit that not only, helps us, focus on the positive in the classic sense, but it helps us with quicker recovery for when things go awry.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, can you all see why I love her? I'm just saying. Well, I have a couple examples of when I've used that, because I read a whole thing on like how gratitude works in the brain, like just like smiling triggers your brain to think you're happy even if you're not feeling happy. Gratitude, like looking for gratitude, actually activates certain parts of the brain, whether you find gratitude or not. Just looking for it activates certain parts of the brain that help you feel happier, right? So it had the article I was reading had this recommendation about using it in an argument. And I know you've heard me tell this story before, Lisa, where it's like it was around Thanksgiving, and we were traveling, and my husband and I got into an argument about something communication related, and frustration and resentment about miscommunications or assumptions or whatever it was that was going on. And we were in one of those like tense silences where we were both just kind of fuming and not sure what to do. And I thought of that article, and I was like, all right, I'm going to list all the things I can think of to be grateful for. And I'm an out loud processor. So I'm like, I'm going to list it out loud, because either it'll help or I'll piss him off. And either way, I still win, because I was pissed off, right? So
opportunity.
I know, right? I was like, well, it's a win-win. So I start saying all of the things that I'm grateful for. And, I find a fair number of things, even though I'm not feeling it. I'm like, well, I could be grateful for this because this was nice, right? I was happy about this. And then I was like, okay, your turn. What are you grateful for? And luckily I have a husband who plays ball with me in that sense. And he started doing that too. And once he was done, we felt better, and we were able to find a solution to move forward from the argument and heal, like you were saying, and then see how we could grow from the experience so that we could support each other better.
Right.
And I feel like that's the kind of thing that we really need more of. I mean, so that's using gratitude to grow as like that bouncing off point. is something we really need in the world right now. And it's not something you can impose upon the world, right? It has to come from inside. It has to come from each of us to look for those things to create the connection, because the resentment creates a disconnection, whereas the gratitude can create a connection. And I think that's, if we're going to heal, if we're going to come together and start communicating it. But again, it has to be, that's an individual thing. You can't force somebody to feel grateful.
Right. And I think it's so important, and this plays upon your story, which is so awesome. It just highlights exactly what potential gratitude has. But it's also this idea of making sure, I always like to define what we're talking about. We could have started that way, but now's a great time to sort of remind everyone, it's not just this feeling, it's not happy. The thing is, it may be easy to express your gratitude when you're happy. But one of the most profound things I ever read, and I think it was part of my lead into starting a group and coaching gratitude as part of what I do, because it felt so powerful to me, was the idea that you could be grateful while you are devastated. And that is so powerful to think about that, and to remember that it's not, oh, I'm happy and life is great and rah, rah, it's not that at all. It's something deeper, where there's appreciation for just elements within your life. Sometimes it's overwhelming and there's tons, and it's just appreciation for the whole dang thing. And other times it's just these tiny little embers within really, really tough situations that you see that are like little glowing lights of hope. And so my whole philosophy is stoke those embers and bring them back to life, because they're what's going to help. And it really is a muscle. And I know for myself and my experiences that it's helped me recover faster, be more resilient, which is all the things we need in order to, and the bottom line is grow, like you said. Mm-hmm. Whether it's, be successful, do what we want to do, achieve our dreams, whatever, whatever you want to call it, that's growing, right? And we need that resiliency and that ability to release what doesn't serve and to embrace what does. And I think gratitude's a really, really good tool for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think that idea and understanding of gratitude, and knowing that it's almost like a separate thing. Like, we think of there being a dichotomy, and again, this whole conversation started from a post that I saw where someone was struggling with this idea of, feeling grateful, but wanting more. And how can I do that? How can that be? And it's almost that gratitude isn't, it's a tool, rather than a state of being, really.
Like that. Yeah.
Because there's a complacency is a state of being. Right. And so if you're using the tool of gratitude to tolerate things that are happening in your life, you can do that. And sometimes we need to do that, because we're riding a wave that is a tough one to ride. And like grief. And there are also times when we have this space and we're ready to grow. We have enthusiasm, or we have a leading to create and build. And then gratitude can be a tool to fuel that energy as well. So when we know that it's a tool, that it's not, I almost wonder, like, how would you define this? Like, we talk about feeling grateful. And, if we think of gratitude as a tool versus a state of being, feelings aren't necessarily states of being either. They're energy that moves through us. They're an experience of life, not a state of being. So I'm kind of curious, like, how would that, how would those like go together? Like, people say, I feel grateful. I almost wonder if there's another feeling that coincides with that feeling grateful.
I think it's almost more like we use it. This may be a semantic argument, but I think it's interesting
Probably.
because when you were talking about the idea of a tool, like when I talk about different sort of, it's almost like gratitude mashups in my group. We go through 4 weeks, and the first part, and this may lend itself to this discussion. I think the first part is just, the sort of what I call the laundry list gratitude. I am grateful for warm coffee and a great conversation and a good friend and being healthy, and you just kind of like sort of pluck things out of your life that you're grateful for as you practice and build the muscle. And then there's what I call gratitude in action, which is when we show gratitude as something that we are doing when we're connecting with others, specifically, very obviously, and literally saying thank you, or maybe we're showing our generosity, or we're giving back of ourselves, or like I love to give back and pay it forward, even, I suppose, is another way to do it, of all the help that I've received, and I want to pay that forward to others. And to me, that's a form of gratitude. Then there's gratitude in adversity, which is what you're talking about when you're really hurting and there's sort of that survival mode. And then there's sort of the gratitude all around. And I would call it like a state of gratitude, but it's not really that it's just that you're in this gratitude, but it's more like you have access to it at any given moment. There's an awareness sort of hovering. So maybe it's the feeling that might not be the right word, but it's the closest one we have. Because again, with this idea that it's a tool, it's more like we have immediate access to. It's like gratitude on demand. Woo! It's great for this instant gratification society.
There's like a button, right?
Yeah, boom,
Boom.
But when you practice it, you kind of do have that where you're like, okay, quick, search for something. What is it? Well, I'm grateful that it could have been worse, or it could whatever. So
well, it's like a muscle. In that sense, it's a muscle, and it fits in. So, I talk about like energy levels and talking about the energy leadership index assessment, that it's like a mindset assessment. And I think about those more expansive levels where you can kind of tap into a big picture. And I feel like gratitude helps you do that, like shift into a bigger picture of connectedness versus the disconnectedness when you're, kind of seeing through this kind of lens. So I think my big takeaway from our conversation here is essentially, don't put gratitude in a box.
I like that. Don't leave it on the shelf, and don't be like, I'll get to that later. But
it's something, it's something to carry around with you and practice, just like any instrument you might play. Gratitude is something to play, to create in the world, just like an instrument. So,
and you can make it fun, and you can make it easy, just like any other habit. You want to start out simply, which is the whole philosophy that I have in my group. Let's start out with the basics and build it. You don't immediately, most of the time when you feel this sort of resistance to be like, oh, I'm going through so much, how can I be grateful, or there's this big gap, it's because you're trying to jump too far into what you perceive that being grateful is. There's a much simpler first step that happens, and then a growth that happens from there. So.
Yeah, I love it. So use it, and it doesn't wherever, whenever.
No wrong way to do it.
There's no wrong way to do it, and there's no limits on what it can do to be of support to you. So tapping into it isn't going to keep you stuck. If you're stuck, there's something else going on, and so there'll be links below if you're stuck to contact either one of us to get some support around that. Gratitude, but even just that gratitude practice can help you move forward and grow versus keeping you where you are. So
true.
Well, thank you so much for joining me, Lisa. It's As always, a wonderful conversation to have with you, and I'm excited to share this with everyone who watches this YouTube channel. And if you liked this conversation and you want to get more, you want to hear more mindset shift moments from me and from other people I bring on, then definitely hit subscribe so you get notified when there is a new video. All right, I will see you all next time.